Pros, save more on the materials you need to get the job done inside and out at Lowe's. Right now, get 10% off in-stock Trex Naturals decking, now available in more styles. Plus, get 15% off select custom entry, interior, and storm doors. Then, we'll deliver it all straight to your job site to help keep your jobs moving. Get the brands pros trust, priced right, and ready when you need them. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 5/27. While supplies last. Selection varies by location.
Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going, and as I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. Today is Friday. We will give you our commentary and then roll directly into the question and answers, which Gogo Zoger has assembled, and some of you have submitted on your own. I want to begin with the simple fact that Republicans are in rebellion. There is no doubt that Donald Trump has hit the first major breach with the Republican Party leadership in the United States Senate, and we are seeing it now over this massive $1.8 billion slush fund. The Republicans are in rebellion, and I think this is a major blow to Donald Trump. He sent the acting attorney general up to the Senate to meet with the Republicans, and they basically told him, no way, it isn't going to happen. Donald Trump seems to think that he can have anything he wants, and that, my friends, is the arrogance of power. But as I've suggested to you in the past, the president's own hubris may bring him down. So let's be clear. Let's be precise. The next few days will be fascinating. What will happen with this fund? And what will happen with the ballroom? Massive rebellion on that as well. There is a recognition that this president is pushing all the boundaries. And when he says that he really doesn't care about what the Republicans in the Senate think, it's like rubbing salt in the wound. Remember that Donald Trump's power has come from the fact that he has been able to intimidate his party. I don't think that's the case, at least not for the next few days. The issues are too great, and the midterm elections are fast approaching. And Republicans, like anyone in politics or in life, want to win. And if, in fact, what happens now is the Republicans losing the House and potentially the United States Senate, despite all of their machinations and, well, the various things they pulled, it will be a real blow. Donald Trump has a whole series of problems, and we are going to see over the next few days how he handles them. There is also, my friends, another factor. Donald Trump Jr. is getting married. Donald Trump, the president, has announced he may not attend his son's wedding because of Iran. In other words, the tensions with Iran are growing, and the potential for a military strike on Iran continues. And Donald Trump, well, we're going to have to see what he does this weekend. The fact that he may not attend his own son's wedding because of Iran is an indication of the intensity of the problem. These facts are clear. The United States has limited options in Iran. Everything we have said we were going to do, including reopening the Strait of Hormuz, has failed. And so we've got a real problem, and Donald Trump understands it. I think he made a terrible mistake when he said of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, he'll go along with whatever I say. Netanyahu is fighting for his own political survival. Of course, I found it amusing that the president suggested that when he's done as president of the United States, he could always go to Israel and become prime minister because he believes his popularity is that high. I wonder, particularly with the current crisis, where it is. There is more news, of course, here in the United States, which needs to be understood and covered. The CBS radio news network is no more. In fact, I have to tell you, I was surprised. I turned on our own CBS affiliate, KCBS in San Francisco. And what did I hear? ABC News. Can you imagine what we've come to? When the CBS radio news network is gone and one of the flagship stations in the United States, KCBS in San Francisco, is broadcasting the ABC national news. Well, I'm delighted. I worked, as you know, for ABC, for KGO Radio in San Francisco, and ABC News is entirely creditable. But do you understand what a dark day it is now that the CBS Radio News Network, founded, created by William Paley, Edward R. Murrow, and sustained by the likes of Walter Cronkite, is now history? It's a sad day, particularly for those of us who have worked in media all these years. Just, to me, devastating. And then, my friends, there is Stephen Colbert and the end of late-night television on CBS. This is the end of an era. And the fact that the two coincided, well, it's a real tribute to coincidence or perhaps planning. These moments in media may sound trivial, but they are not. The house that Edward R. Murrow built is being torn down. And of course, the late night talk tradition exemplified by Colbert in recent years is now over. What does that mean for political satire? What does that mean for all of us in terms of the future? That's the question that we need to ask. The fact that our news sources are more limited disturbs me. And there is a question. Is this happening because of financial reasons? Or is it happening because Barry Weiss and CBS have decided to surrender to Donald Trump and the current administration? I must tell you, I regret to say this. I believe it is the intimidation of Donald Trump and the Trump administration, which has dealt such a severe blow to the First Amendment, to CBS, to NPR. Let's not forget, in the rush to deal with all these changing trends, to understand that Donald Trump has dealt a death blow to other forms of media in this country. His attitude toward public broadcasting, his limitation on funding for NPR, his war against the Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, and all of the institutions we have built over the years that have made such a difference in the lives of millions around the world. What the Trump administration has done to media is disgraceful. And the lawsuits against CBS, NBC, ABC, the lawsuits which are then settled, this to me is the most egregious crime of the Trump administration. Let me remind all of you that my experiences in media extend back a little more than 3 decades. The fact that I have had the privilege, the opportunity to be in media, to be able to talk about news and politics, is probably the greatest experience one can ever imagine. And now, look what's happening. These restrictions are appalling. These changes are terrifying. Now, there are some who will say, well, John, they said that about many things when there were changes, when we went from the horse and buggy to the automobile. But let me be crystal clear. I don't want there to be any ambiguity. There will be new forms of media which emerge. But what do you do when, as was my case, when a young woman asked me, John, I would like to make a career in the media. What do you suggest? Well, the options are so limited now. Local radio, at least in Northern California, is dead. And if you're talking about making a living at it, impossible. The days when salaries in media hit highs and allowed one to live are in the past. It's true that media stars do exceptionally well, but how many media stars are there? And the real lesson of Colbert is that no matter how big a star you are, no matter what you have accomplished, no matter what your future may hold, the fact is that the Trump administration's unrelenting war against the media has worked. It has, because things that we have always counted on are now gone. I say this with deep regret. And I would also point out that one of the things that made CBS News so spectacular in the early days of radio was the fact that in every capital, at every war front, there was live coverage. Do we have that coverage today in Ukraine? The answer is no. Do we have that live coverage in Iran? The answer is no. How do we get our news? Where does it come from? And what does it mean to see all of this happening? The good news, of course, is that there will be new vehicles, new forms. And may I say, in terms of politics, Republicans in rebellion against Donald Trump gives hope and life, perhaps, to the future of the Republican Party. But this, my friends, is a daily battle. It is a battle which must be won on so many different fronts. So let me prioritize what I think the really important elements are. First of all, we must have real news coverage. The assault on CBS, ABC, NBC, NPR, all of that we can recover from. It'll take years. And of course, to rebuild the Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, well, it may take a generation. The simple fact is, what the Trump administration has done has created a crisis for all of us who care about news and information. There is a second element here which needs to be explored. In order to have a real political debate, you need what my political hero, Wendell Willkie, called a loyal opposition. Within the Republican Party today, there must be a loyal opposition. That is to say, they may agree, the majority of them, with the policies of the Trump administration, but they must stand up and oppose the way those policies are being expressed and the attack on the Republican Party, the contempt that Donald Trump seems to have for the Republican Party today. Now, let me point out I am a Democrat. Oh, it's true. Once upon a time, I was a Republican. But I was a liberal Republican. And of course, as George Will so wisely commented, being a liberal Republican is a little bit like being a high church Unitarian. It's possible, but pointless. We must go back in our political debates to the days when you had viable, loyal opposition. Willkie wasn't opposed to inter-party fighting. In fact, he led the fight for internationalism against isolationism in the Republican Party. So the question that I wanted to pose this morning to you is, where is the loyal opposition? And now that we know that there is a break with the Republican Party, with Donald Trump, how will that expression be felt? You know, I've listened to the Republican comments, but they're afraid. They're afraid because they have seen what Donald Trump has done, what he continues to do to opposition. This week, we learned a valuable lesson about primaries and being primaried. And I must tell you, it scared me. It scared me because if you cannot have voices rise in the Republican Party who disagree with Donald Trump, then we don't have a real Republican Party. What you have is what Donald Trump Jr. expressed on the ellipse on January 6th. The Republican Party, he said, no longer exists. It is the party of Donald Trump. This morning, I have hope. I have hope that the Republican Party even if I disagree with him on policy, will fight back against what Donald Trump has done. I also have hope that the Republican Party will finally shake itself out of its lethargy and realize that what the Republican Party can be is important to the American political system. And I believe today we have learned a lesson about the morality affecting media. And that's why I wanted to emphasize that in today's podcast. There is a lot to talk about. We're going to continue to do it, and we'll be watching this weekend. War or peace? Will the media come back? What about the Republican Party? Well, those are the issues, and we'll watch them this weekend. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. We're going to go right to question and answers, but let me just say that I love hearing your thoughts. I love the fact that you can write to me. You can write a review on Apple Podcasts, drop a comment on YouTube or Spotify, click any of the links in the show notes to connect with me on social media. That's how we got the questions that we're about to answer. Please remember to share this episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand, which is, of course, our goal. This show's been getting so much positive attention that we're excited to bring on the advertising support that we have. Many of you have inquired about whether you can advertise, and, well, we would welcome any pitch you want to make. And, of course, that helps us create more opportunities for Around the Political World with John Rothman. And now, courtesy of Go-Go Soger, let me go directly to your questions and answers, which, frankly, I look forward to each week. Arnaldo asks the following. Glad you cover the major issues. On China taking back Taiwan, aka Formosa, why doesn't Putin use the same reasoning and invade the great state of Alaska, bringing it back into the neo-Russian Soviet bloc? Good question. I think Putin has his hands full dealing with Ukraine. And let's remember that for Putin, his goal is the recreation of what was the Soviet Empire or the Russian Empire. This is an important question because with so many issues, the turbulence around the world, what Russia does and how Putin proceeds makes a huge difference. So my answer to you, Arnaldo, is this. Putin has no limits in terms of his domestic power. His foreign policy in shambles. How we respond and how he responds to our response will make a huge difference. But make no mistake, when I studied in what was then the Soviet Union, I understood that they were a failure as an economic power. But as a military power, as long as they possess nuclear weapons, it means something. Although we know that right now, the land war in Ukraine is not going well for the Russians, but it's not going well for the Ukrainians either. This comes from a listener on TikTok who asks this. We've waited and we've seen it always the same. Everything Trump touches is a disaster. The answer is, in my judgment, you are correct. And that's why we are seeing the Republican rebellion. What is the first job of every politician? It is to get reelected. That's the goal. That's it. Because if you're not reelected, you become superfluous. Just take a look at Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, Chris Christie. You can go down the list. So holding public office, having an influence, really matters. And we are determined to understand that fact. Does everything Trump touches turn into a disaster? I agree with you, but then I don't like Donald Trump or his policies. And so we now have to wait and see how the Republicans work their way through. This comes from Stephen, who poses a question on YouTube. John, why do you attack Christians for seeing this as a Christian country, but support the right of Jews to make Palestine the Jewish state of Israel? Don't you see the hypocrisy in this? Context in America. a fight over what the country is or should be Christian. Christian nationalists say yes. Liberals in most institutions say the founding fathers were explicitly secular and pushing back against that essential. Most of the same liberals who reject Christian America support Jewish Israel. Let me be clear about this, and it's a great question. The United States believes in the separation of church and state. At least that's what we've always believed. Is that true today? Not when the administration and people on the right say that the wall of separation is a fiction. And that's a tragedy, because all you have to do is go back and hear what the founders had to say. A Christian nation, we are not. A nation made up of a variety of other nations, all coming together, e pluribus unum, to create the United States of America, we are. But that's very different than the creation of Israel, which is a democracy. In Israel, Jews, Muslims, Christians, Arabs, and a whole host of other people, including the Druze, have the right to vote. Israel is a Jewish state because Jew, in this reference, is to a people who were homeless and persecuted around the world. Jews are part of a civilization possessing history, language, literature, art form, religion, philosophy, and land. Possessing those 6 components, the Jewish state was created. And it was created to be a secular democracy. Oh, they have their religious battles, no question about it. But they are a democracy in which you can worship or not worship as you please. You can be whatever faith you want or no faith at all. But in Israel, you can live freely. And that to me is the key. In Israel, there is a sense that what happens to Israel represents the future of Jews around the world. Take a look at the Jew hatred as it has risen. I must tell you, there is a real difference between Israeli democracy and American democracy, in the sense that we in the United States are not a Christian nation. We don't pretend to be a Christian nation. Our founders may have been Christians, but they established the principle of secular democracy. And in Israel, a Jewish state doesn't mean a religious state. It means a state in which Jews, who are a civilization, again, history, language, literature, art form, religion, philosophy, and land, in which Jews have the right to assert their self-determination. Zionism is a movement to give to the Jew the same right as every other people in the world. That was the view of Louis Brandeis, Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court, who was simultaneously president of the Zionist Organization of America. And let me say a word about the Texas campaign. We have a candidate for office in Texas who says if she is elected to the House of Representatives in the primary, she wins the primary and then wins in November, that she will do away with the Zionists. And I'm delighted to tell you the entirety of the Democratic Party, including AOC, who is certainly no friend of Israel and Zionism, have condemned what she has said. And that, my friends, is what we should be doing. And this comes from Arneldo. Thanks, John, for your introspective on this corrupt Trump administration and the MAGA followers, voters, who blindly and instantly believe and follow just like lemmings jumping off cliffs. I have no answer but hope the next administration will reverse wrong back into right. Well, that's what's happening in the Republican Party, even as we speak. There is a rebellion. They are saying we are not going to be a one-person party. Donald Trump is not the political leader who will impose on the Republican Party the idea that it's no longer that party, it is the party of Trump. That to me is very important. And what your question suggests, and I believe it's important, is that Republican leaders are proving today that they are not lemmings, and that's good news. This question from David. I can't listen anymore. I have Trump fatigue. This is a common feeling, especially with younger listeners who continue to acknowledge it matters, says Go-Go Zoger in her commentary. Well, you know what? You can shut your eyes, you can shut your ears, you can say, as some of my friends do, I'm not listening to the news anymore, and I don't want to hear any more about Trump. But what you do then is to abdicate the very essence of what democracy is. Even when I become discouraged, and it does happen on occasion, even though I'm a very optimistic person, I realize that if I'm not engaged in the process, if I'm not out there every single day, as fatiguing as it might be, then I'm not doing what I should be doing in terms of my civic responsibility. Do you understand? Apathy is the worst part of democracy. My family and I have just filled out our ballots for the June 2nd primary here in California. We all voted. Why? Because it is important to make sure that we are never, ever discouraged, that we continue to battle and fight for the things we believe in. Oh, it's true, there are candidates I would rather not support, issues that I would rather not have to deal with, reoccurring problems with Donald Trump, and yes, Trump fatigue. But let me point out to you, Trump will not be president in a few years, and there will be a whole new chapter written by the Republicans and the Democrats. I can't wait for another decade to pass where we will see what kind of leadership emerges. There is a last question. It comes from John. The question is, if Donald Trump does not attend his son's wedding this weekend, does it mean we are going to go to a war with Iran again? That's what Donald Trump says. And all of us need to be aware of the power of the President of the United States. So, John, let me address you very directly. Under our system, a declaration of war, which is written into the Constitution, is no longer necessary, because what we have allowed is an imperial presidency, the ability of a president to make war, to make major decisions. And let me point out to you, some of the times when the president acts unilaterally, we get good results. But too often in this administration, the results have not been to our liking. And there's one other issue which I want to raise. It's not part of question and answers. It's just John Rothman. The administration is now suggesting that tobacco may be good for you. Did you hear me? Tobacco may be good for you. This comes from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Secretary of Health and Human Services. May I phrase it very clearly? For that statement alone, he ought to be removed from office. Oh, the vaccines and all the rest too. But the idea, the absurd notion that tobacco may be good for you is so absurd, so contrary to medical evidence. But that's part of what this administration does. Whether it has to do with health, foreign policy, the environment, they ignore evidence. And that, my friends, should concern us all. Well, it is Friday. I've answered questions. I've even thrown some things in on my own that I think are critical. But I want you to know that I appreciate the fact that you are tuning in to Around the Political World with John Rothman. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your observations. Remember, you can write a review on Apple Podcasts, drop a comment on YouTube or Spotify, and click any of the links in the show notes to connect with me on social media. Remember, please, to share this episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand. I'll be back on Monday. By the way, have a great Memorial Day weekend, and understand that on Monday, we'll start all over again. Another week of discussion, of debate, and I must say, I can't wait. I am John Rothman. I want to say a special thank you to Go-Go Zoger, the wonderful producer of this podcast. and we will be back on Monday with more. This is John Rothman. Around the Political World with John Rothman continues after the Memorial Day weekend. All right, have a great one. See you Monday. Bye-bye.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.